They buried him, but he wasn't dead. Now, the young billionaire is back, and he's coming for everyone who betrayed him. The sun was sinking slowly, spreading a warm golden glow across the city skyline. Long shadows stretched over the streets, and the air felt heavy with the promise of night. Alexander Kane's black limousine rolled quietly into the driveway. It was strange for him to be home so early. Normally, the young billionaire spent his evenings trapped in endless meetings, signing papers, or talking to business partners until the city's lights burned against the dark sky. But tonight was different. Tonight, he wanted peace. He stepped out of the car, loosening his tie as the chauffeur drove away. The huge house stood before him, tall, elegant, and silent. Too silent. Inside, only the soft hum of the air conditioner filled the air. No footsteps, no faint music, no sound of his wife greeting him from the living room. He took a deep breath and began climbing the stairs. His leather shoes made a dull thud on each step. Halfway up, he noticed the master bedroom door. It wasn't wide open. It wasn't shut, either. It was almost closed, just enough for sound to slip through. And that was when he heard it. A voice. A woman's voice. Familiar. Clarissa, his wife. She was speaking in a low, tense tone, the way she spoke when she didn't want anyone else to hear her. Then he realized she wasn't talking to him. There was another voice, faint, muffled, coming through her phone. He slowed down, moving closer. Every step felt heavy, deliberate. He reached for the door handle, but his hand froze in midair. Her words cut through the silence like a knife. Yes, I'm sure. Tonight. I'll just mix it in his food. He'll never suspect a thing. The air left his lungs. His chest tightened. Mixed something in his food? He felt a sudden coldness in his hands, as if all the warmth in his body had drained away. The other voice, deep, calm, dangerous, replied from the phone. Then do it. 1 dose is enough. After that, it's over. Alexander's pulse thundered in his ears. He could hear his own heartbeat. Fast, hard, relentless. He pressed himself against the wall beside the door, forcing his breathing to stay quiet. Every muscle in his body was tense, ready to run or fight. Poison. They were talking about poison. And the he. In their conversation, there was no doubt anymore. It was him. His own wife. The woman he had trusted with everything. The call went on, every word twisting deeper into him. He stayed there, frozen, afraid that even the sound of his breath would give him away. By the time the call ended, his world had shifted. His wife was not who he thought she was. Someone else was in on it, someone who wanted him dead. And tonight was supposed to be his last meal. Alexander's hand rested on the door for a moment longer, his mind screaming at him to turn around and run. But instead, he pushed it open. The hinges gave a soft creak. Inside, Clarissa was sitting at her vanity, brushing her long, dark hair. Her reflection in the mirror caught his, and for a second, their eyes met. She smiled. Home early. Her voice was light, smooth, almost too smooth. Alexander forced his lips into the familiar smile she had seen 1,000 times. Yeah, he said evenly, walking toward her. Thought I'd surprise you. She turned, leaned in, and kissed him softly. Her eyes calm, her hands steady, no sign of guilt, no flicker of fear. But inside Alexander's chest, a storm was raging. Every word he had overheard was still echoing in his head. Every detail about the poison, every whisper about tonight. And now, she was standing here, pretending nothing was wrong. Pretending she wasn't planning to kill him before sunrise. It was almost laughable. Almost. And then, the thought came to him. A wild, dangerous, absurd idea. If Clarissa wanted him dead, then maybe that's exactly what she should think had happened. Not just so he could escape her plan, but so he could watch what happened next. So he could see who would cry at his funeral and who would celebrate. So he could rip the masks off the people who thought they had fooled him. That night, he refused to eat, claiming he wasn't hungry. Her plan lingered in the air, unspoken, while he quietly began to craft one of his own. The more he thought about it, the more the corners of his lips twitched, a grim smile threatening to break through. By morning, the idea had grown roots. It wasn't just a thought anymore. It was a plan. He picked up his phone and called the one person he knew he could trust with his life, Daniel Hayes. A longtime friend, a skilled doctor. When Daniel answered, Alexander's voice was low, almost a whisper. He told him everything. Every word he'd overheard. Every suspicion. Every fear. Daniel was silent for a long moment before replying. If we do this, there's no turning back. Alexander's reply was steady. I don't want to turn back. That afternoon, arrangements were made in a discreet, private hospital, a place where no one would see him alive, not even by accident. And then came the final night. The night before he would die. Alexander stood in his study, the soft glow of the desk lamp spilling across the room. The world outside was quiet, but inside him, every heartbeat felt like a drum. He stared at his reflection in the glass cabinet. This might be the last time he would see himself as Alexander Kane, billionaire, husband, living man. If this was going to work, it had to be perfect. Every detail had to scream real death. No mistakes, no slip-ups. Somewhere down the hall, he heard Clarissa's laughter. Light, sweet, fake. She thought she was winning. Alexander smiled to himself, cold and sharp. By tomorrow night, she would think she had won. And that would be the beginning of her downfall. The rain fell hard that night, hammering the windows like 1,000 angry fists. The lights in the dining room glowed soft and warm, but Alexander could feel the cold of the storm pressing against the house. He sat at the long mahogany dining table, a half-finished plate of food in front of him. Clarissa sat across from him, her perfect smile frozen in place. Her fork moved slowly, her eyes flicking toward his plate every few seconds. Watching, waiting. Is it good? She asked softly. Alexander swallowed and forced a warm smile. Perfect, he said. She didn't know the truth. A few minutes earlier, when she had gone back to the kitchen for wine, Alexander had made the switch. Her special plate of food, the one she had carefully prepared herself, was now sitting untouched in the kitchen. On the table in front of him was a clean plate from the fridge. Still, he took another bite, just to sell the act. Inside, his stomach felt tight. His heart was calm, but his mind was ready for the moment. He glanced at the clock on the far wall. 8:44 p.m. Almost time. The sound of the rain grew louder. The air seemed heavier. Then, right on cue, 8:45. Alexander's hand flew to his chest. His fork slipped from his fingers and hit the plate with a sharp clang. His breathing grew ragged, uneven. He let his eyes widen, as if in sudden pain, before slumping in his chair. His body swayed, teetering on the edge. Clarissa gasped loudly, her voice sharp with fake panic. Alex! Alex! She ran to his side, kneeling next to him. Her hands grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. Too hard, too fast, as if she wasn't really afraid of hurting him. Alexander let his body go limp, his head lolling to the side. A moment later, the front door burst open. Daniel's men, dressed as frantic security staff, rushed inside. They played their parts perfectly, shouting orders, pretending to check his pulse, calling for a stretcher. Clarissa stood aside, her face pale, her hand covering her mouth. Within minutes, Alexander was lifted into a waiting private ambulance. The flashing lights cut through the rain as the vehicle sped away into the storm. Over the radio, his cause of death was announced, suspected cardiac arrest. By midnight, the world knew. Alexander Kane, 32-year-old billionaire philanthropist, dies suddenly at home. News channels played his smiling photos on repeat. Social media overflowed with grief and shock. His charities posted heartfelt tributes. And Clarissa posted a tearful picture of herself dressed in black, clutching his wedding ring against her chest. The image went viral within hours. But miles away, in a locked private hospital ward, Alexander was very much alive. Lying in bed, hidden from the world, he scrolled through the news on a small tablet. His lips curled into a bitter smile. They believe it. Every single one of them. And then, the moment he had been waiting for came. 2 days after his death, Clarissa made a phone call. Alexander watched the video feed Daniel had set up, hidden microphones in the house capturing her every word. Her voice was different now. Lighter. Freer. Like someone who had just dropped a heavy burden. It's done, she whispered into the phone. We can move forward now. No more hiding. Alexander's smile faded. We? It wasn't just her. There was someone else. Someone who had been waiting for him to be gone. Someone powerful enough to make her feel safe now that she thought he was dead. Alexander's hand curled into a fist. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about finding that person. And when he did, neither of them would see the end coming. The sky over the city was heavy and gray, pressing low as if it, too, was mourning. A cold wind moved through the streets, carrying the smell of rain and wet stone. The Kane estate was wrapped in sorrow. Velvet black curtains covered the tall windows. Fresh white lilies lined the marble steps, their sweet scent mixing with the chill in the air. Inside, the grand hall was full. Mourners spoke in hushed voices, their words blending into a low, steady hum. Cameras flashed outside the gates, reporters shouting questions at anyone who had ever shaken Alexander Kane's hand. Clarissa sat in the front row, dressed in a flawless black gown. Her makeup was perfect, but just smudged enough to make it look like she had cried all night. In her hand was a silk handkerchief, which she dabbed gently at the corner of her eyes. Before her stood the closed casket. Inside it, no body, no man. Only sandbags to give it weight, and his favorite suit to make it believable. From a hidden corner high above the hall, behind tinted glass, Alexander watched. Alive, breathing, listening. He studied every face, every handshake, every hug that lingered a little too long. He saw two of his old business partners standing in the back, leaning toward each other with sly smiles. He spotted a cousin he hadn't spoken to in years, now leaning in close to Clarissa, his tone almost warm. Too warm. And then there was one of his board members, bending low, whispering something in her ear that made her lips twitch with the faintest, secret smile. Daniel sat a few rows behind, his eyes moving like a camera, quietly noting every glance and every whisper. The priest's voice echoed through the hall, speaking words of farewell. Clarissa lowered her head at the right moments, sighed at the right pauses, played the grieving widow to perfection. When the service ended, people drifted into small groups, talking in softer voices now. Clarissa stepped away from the crowd, moving toward a quiet corner to take a phone call. Alexander leaned forward in his seat. In her purse, a tiny bug, placed there by Daniel, caught every word. The voice on the other end was deep, calm, and dangerous. The same voice from that night. "It's time," the man said. "We'll discuss the estate and the transfer tomorrow. No one suspects a thing." Clarissa's reply came after a short pause. Soft, but sharp enough to cut through the air. "Good. The sooner we lock this down, the better." Alexander's fingers tightened on the armrest until his knuckles turned white. Estate. Transfer. They weren't just celebrating his death. They were getting ready to take everything he had worked for, everything he had built with his own hands. The mourners thought they were leaving the funeral of a dead man. The city thought it had lost one of its richest sons. But Alexander Kane wasn't gone. He was watching, waiting. And when he came back, it wouldn't be for forgiveness. It would be for a reckoning. 3 nights after his funeral, Alexander Kane stepped into the world again, not as the man people remembered, but as a shadow. No tailored suit, no shiny shoes, just a dark hoodie, a cap pulled low over his eyes, and a quiet, dangerous anger that made every step feel heavier than it should. Daniel was waiting in the car. No questions, no nervous glances, just the steady rumble of the engine as Alexander slid into the passenger seat. The streets were mostly empty, washed in pale yellow light from the street lamps. They followed Clarissa's sleek black Mercedes from a safe distance, their headlights low, their windows dark. She wasn't going home. Instead, she wove through the city like she was trying to lose someone. Sharp turns, sudden lane changes, no clear destination. But Daniel stayed on her tail, his hands steady on the wheel. Finally, she stopped. A tall glass building rose before them, its mirrored walls reflecting the night. It was the kind of place that belonged to billion-dollar deals and secret meetings, but it should have been locked and dark at midnight. Yet, the lobby lights were on. From their spot across the street, Alexander watched Clarissa step out of her car. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement. She didn't look over her shoulder. She wasn't worried about being followed. The glass doors slid open, and there, waiting for her, was a man in a perfectly tailored navy suit. Alexander's chest tightened. Even from this distance, he recognized the posture, the confidence. The man reached for her hand, and didn't just shake it. He held it. Too long, too familiar. Her smile told him everything. It wasn't the polite, cold smile she gave strangers. This was warmer, softer, almost intimate. Alexander's jaw clenched. "Zoom in," he said quietly. Daniel lifted the camera and twisted the lens until the man's face came into sharp focus. A square jaw, eyes like ice. And there, on his left cheek, a faint, pale scar. Alexander's stomach dropped. The name hit him like a punch. Victor Hale, CEO of Kane Global's biggest rival. A man Alexander had crushed in a ruthless billion-dollar acquisition 2 years ago. A man who had looked him in the eye and sworn revenge. Now here he was, shaking hands with Alexander's wife like they had been partners for years. The truth snapped together in his mind like the final piece of a puzzle. This wasn't just a cheating wife. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a corporate murder. They had faked grief to hide a hostile takeover. They had planned his death, not just to end him, but to steal everything he had built. Across the street, the building's lights glowed like a stage, and the two of them, Clarissa and Victor, were the lead actors in a play written for his destruction. Alexander's voice was low when he finally spoke, every word sharp as a blade. They think I'm gone, but I'm about to become their worst nightmare. Alexander didn't rush in. He wasn't the kind of man to throw a punch without knowing exactly where it would land. Revenge, he knew, was not best served cold, but calculated. From the safe house Daniel had set up, a quiet place on the edge of the city, Alexander stood over a long oak table. Every inch of it was covered in evidence. Photos from the funeral, printed transcripts of Clarissa's phone calls, business records from Hale Industries, and a crisp copy of his own will. The very document Victor Hale wanted to get his hands on. Alexander's eyes moved from paper to paper, piecing it all together. Victor wasn't just using Clarissa. He wasn't after the woman. He was after the empire. Everything. And then, Alexander saw it. The weakness. The crack in Victor's armor. Hale Industries was already drowning in debt. They had thrown millions into a shiny new tech project that had failed before it even hit the market. Victor was desperate for cash. Without Alexander's fortune, he wouldn't just lose, he'd collapse. Alexander smiled, slow, cold. Step 1. Turn allies into enemies. Daniel got to work. Through anonymous emails and whispered phone calls, they leaked insider information to Victor's biggest investors. The message was simple. Hale Industries was on the verge of bankruptcy. 48 hours later, the stock price dipped. Investors began pulling out. Victor's name was already being spoken in worried, hushed tones across boardrooms. Step 2. Break the trust between Victor and Clarissa. Alexander took out a single sheet of paper and began writing. The handwriting was not his own. It was forged to match Victor Hale's signature perfectly. The letter was short, but every word was a knife. Once the money's in my hands, I don't need you. Don't call me. Don't follow me. You're on your own. Daniel slipped it into Clarissa's private mailbox under the cover of night. 2 days later, word came back from one of Daniel's sources. Clarissa had stormed into the same glass-walled building at midnight. In the parking lot, she and Victor had been caught in a heated argument. She was shouting, her voice echoing off the pavement. Victor's jaw was tight. Neither noticed the man with the camera in the shadows. Alexander studied the photo later, the first crack in their alliance captured forever. Step 3. Take back the empire without showing his face. Using an offshore account, Alexander made quiet, careful moves on the market. He began buying back controlling shares in one of his own subsidiaries, a company Victor had been circling like a shark. It sent shockwaves through the industry. Victor's lawyers scrambled. His plans shifted. Clarissa's confidence began to slip. From the safety of the safe house, Alexander watched the slow unraveling. Their partnership, once built on greed and confidence, was starting to rot. They still had no idea he was alive. But with every move, every whisper, every forged letter, he was tightening the noose around both their necks. And when the time came, Alexander Kane would not just return from the dead. He would drag them into a ruin so deep, they would never crawl out. It was almost poetic, luring them to the same place under the same lie. Like pulling two snakes into the same basket and letting them tear each other apart. Victor Hale's message was short and sharp. I have evidence Clarissa is betraying you. Meet me at the old pier. Midnight. Come alone. Clarissa's came an hour later. I have proof Victor plans to cut you out. Old pier. Midnight. No one else. They both thought they were the hunter. Neither of them knew they were the prey. The pier sat at the edge of the city like a forgotten skeleton, wooden boards rotting, metal rails rusted to red. The only light came from a single lamp that flickered as if it, too, was afraid to be there. Waves slapped against the pilings in slow, hollow thuds. Victor arrived first. Black coat, leather gloves. His breath came out in sharp clouds in the cold night air. He stood near the edge, scanning the darkness, every so often checking over his shoulder. 5 minutes later, heels tapped against the wet boards. Clarissa emerged from the shadows in a long coat, her hair pinned up, her eyes darting. She stopped a few feet away from Victor. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp but her fingers twitching at her side. "I was about to ask you the same thing," Victor shot back, his gaze narrowing. The conversation turned bitter in seconds. Accusations flew like thrown knives. Clarissa yanked a folded paper from her coat, the forged letter Alexander had planted, her hands trembling as she held it up. "I found this. You were going to leave me the second you got the money." Victor's lips twisted into a mocking smile. He pulled out his phone, swiping to a screenshot, the fake bank statement Daniel had made. "Really? This says you've been stealing from me for months." Neither knew both were lies. Neither stopped to question. They only saw the betrayal they wanted to believe. The shouting grew louder. Clarissa's voice cracked, her face red with rage. Victor stepped closer, his jaw tight, fists clenched. Then it came. A slow, deliberate clap. The sound cut through their fight like a blade. Clap, clap, clap. Both froze. Their heads turned toward the far end of the pier. Out of the shadows, a figure walked slowly into view. Hood pulled low, hands in pockets. Each step echoed on the wet boards, steady and unhurried. They couldn't see the face, but the voice was unmistakable. Funny thing about betrayal. Victor's eyes widened. Clarissa's lips trembled. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. The hood lowered. Alexander Kane. Alive. He stepped forward until the flickering lamp lit his face. His eyes were cold, almost dead, yet burning with a quiet fire. Betrayal only works if the other person stays buried. Guess I've never been good at staying in the ground. Clarissa stumbled back a step, her hand gripping the railing as though the pier itself might fall away. Victor's mouth tightened, but for the first time, a flicker of fear broke through his calm mask. Alexander kept walking toward them, slow, deliberate, like a man who knew the end of the story before the first page was written. "You took my life, my name. You even stood over my grave. But you made one mistake." He stopped just a few feet away, close enough for them to see the smirk curling at the corner of his lips. "You didn't make sure I stayed in it." Neither spoke. The only sounds were the waves against the pier and the faint, rapid breaths of two people who knew their world had just ended. The trap had worked. They weren't just caught. They were cornered. And Alexander Kane was not leaving until they paid, in full. The pier was quiet, too quiet. The wind whistled between the wooden planks, carrying the smell of salt and rust. Every step seemed to echo into the darkness. Clarissa stood frozen. Victor's jaw was tight, his eyes scanning for a way out, but there wasn't one. Alexander stood a few feet away, hood half off, face clear in the dim light. His smile wasn't warm. It was slow, sharp, and cold, the kind of smile that said you're already finished. "Do you know the thing about poison?" Alexander's voice was calm, almost gentle. "It doesn't have to touch your lips to destroy you. Sometimes the thought of it alone will eat you alive." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. With a flick of his wrist, it landed on the wet wooden boards between them. Clink. A small glass vial. Inside, a clear, almost innocent-looking liquid. Clarissa's eyes locked on it. Her breathing quickened. Victor's throat moved as he swallowed hard. Alexander tilted his head. "This is the same poison you planned to feed me. I thought about letting one of you drink it tonight, but then I realized." He stepped closer, his shoes slow and heavy against the pier. His voice dropped lower, like a blade sliding between their ribs. "You both deserve worse." From the shadows, another figure stepped into view, Daniel. He held a small black device in his hand. Without a word, he pressed a button. A deep boom rolled across the water. Both Victor and Clarissa's phones buzzed in their pockets. "Check them," Alexander ordered. They pulled the phones out. On the screen, a live video feed. Both of their luxury cars, engulfed in flames, exploding in bursts of orange and black. Victor's lips parted in disbelief. Clarissa covered her mouth. "That," Alexander said, his tone almost casual, "was the appetizer." He took another step forward, and the old wood creaked under his weight. "By sunrise, every account you own will be empty. Your house is gone. Every friend who pretended to love you will vanish. You'll wake up to a world where you have nothing. Victor snapped. You think you can scare me? He barked and lunged forward. Daniel moved faster. One brutal punch to the ribs, and Victor staggered, gasping for air. Clarissa's voice trembled. Alexander, please, we can fix this. I didn't mean. Didn't mean? His eyes turned to ice. When I died, you didn't cry. You didn't mourn. You celebrated. You planned a future where I was nothing but a body in the ground. He leaned forward just enough for them to see the rage burning in his eyes. Now I'm going to let you live, so you can feel what I felt. Every hour, every night, until you wish you were dead too. The wind whipped through, rattling the pier's old chains. Alexander turned away, Daniel following close behind. Behind them, Clarissa began to sob, her voice breaking in the cold air. Victor's curses cut through the sound of the waves. Desperate, furious, powerless. Alexander didn't look back. He didn't need to. By morning, the Kane Empire would be his again. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't just revenge. It was the purest kind of justice a dead man could give. If you enjoy these stories, like and subscribe. Your comments and likes are the fuel that keep the next story coming.